have a monthly workshop for the PhD students, and we have already had several workshops already. They are in the archive. If you go to the SOAS PhD website, you should be able to find all the workshops we have done so far. Just give you a quick refreshment, because some of the new students do not know we have already had some of the workshop already. One of them is prelim exam, how to prepare for prelim exam. And when I talk about that, congratulations to Nick. He just passed his prelim exam. Congratulations. And a big promise all of you. If you need ice cream today, he will buy one for you. And then we also had the dissertation proposal writing workshop. We also had dissertation writing workshop. We also had the grant writing. So all of them are archived on the website. So please take a look when you have time. This semester, we're going to have another 3 of them. The first one will be today's, how to successfully publish a paper in journal article. The next month, we're going to talk about job searching. And the month after, we're going to talk about reading. How do you enhance your dissertation by reading different types of books. And Joyce will also join us today. That's why she wants to sit in today, right? Prepare for the third one.
Yes,
and,
to understand the ambiance.
Yeah, so let me now introduce formally to our speaker today. Professor Jin Zhang, you probably know him. He's teaching the research methods class now. If you think it's too hard, just drop the class. It's still he was ranked in the top 5 for the journal article production. So he's a very productive author in our field. He will, of course, talk about his experience in published journals. And Professor Hope, you're also familiar with them. You know, she's teaching a couple of seminar courses, and also the research methods about the critical thinking in the summer too. Some of you also, it's too late to drop her course, but anyway. She will talk about her experience as also experienced and a productive author, and also as editor of journals. So it's a good teamwork for everyone to work together. The other thing quickly is in order to prepare for the workshop for next semester, if you have any suggestions about the topics you might be interested in, I can try to talk to the faculty member to have a workshop. What we try to do is not to ask anyone to do twice. So each faculty only has one chance to do a workshop. And it's always a teamwork. So you can have an opportunity to get familiar with the different faculty members too. And also, if you have any food suggestion, let me know. So we can prepare for the next one and the one after. So I want to be a little bit different too. So Chinese food only once this semester. And then we can have something else. Okay, no delays. So thank you.
I go first. Okay. First of all, thank you for attending this workshop. And Hope and I are going to give the presentation on how to publish the papers in the journals. And as Iris mentioned, that just a couple minutes ago, and Hope used to be the chief editor of the information organizations, and she also experienced in terms of the review papers. And in terms of me, this presentation basically we try to address these issues from 3 different perspectives. One is from an author's perspective, and the second is from the reviewer. I think it's quite important. And third, from the editor's perspective. I think after this well-rounded design, I give you the full picture about how to publish your papers in your future.
And I think one of the things we haven't done is to try and keep those 3 viewpoints separate, because of course they overlap. And I think the other thing it struck me this morning is that one of the things you need to do if you follow the information or the advice that we give you today is to make sure that you're applying it to the right kind of journal. Because you may have like a hard science journal, like I'd say information processing and management is a pretty scientific method. And you'd approach that differently with a different kind of paper than say a professional journal, like Cataloging Classification Quarterly. And then there's more theoretical ones. I think of Journal of Documentation as being one. And that's okay. I'd rather have the breeze and take the water bottle off. And then, so there are different kinds of journals, and you want to make sure that you're applying what we're saying to the right kind of journal. It doesn't mean that what we say applies to every journal across the field. And I think that we're happy if people have questions to have interruptions, rather than leaving them till the end when we've all forgotten them. So we can go with that.
Okay, during the presentation, Hu and I probably we should be back and forth and in a very casual
And we'll
format.
interrupt each other.
And also, you are encouraged to throw questions to us, and then if you feel have some questions and something like that. And the first we are talking about the journals. You have to aware the different journal papers. It's not always okay. The papers they're treated differently. If you look at that, you can classify it into the category. It's not necessarily including, maybe including more. I just gave the major paper type. One is the communication in the columns papers, and the research paper and the review papers, and also book review. When we're talking about the research paper, probably we are focused on the third one. The third one is really reflecting the research, the result, and something like that. I'm not going to say the other type of publication is not very important, but if you are I was the chair of the EC, and I know how the people review the publication. That when people look at your work, they're looking for your research paper instead of the book review. And even you publish it in the journal, it doesn't mean it's research paper. You have to be aware. Sometimes I have the communication with editors and I have questions and back and forth, and they're still published, but it's not the content of the research paper.
I think that's fairly common that if an editor gets a paper that isn't quite as far along maybe as it should be, they might suggest, like if the journal has communications, that it just go in there, or as a brief report of some kind. So it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it means that you're going to have another step after that.
So here, just want to just tell you, in this presentation, we are focused on the third, okay? And for your promotion, they also just look at your research paper instead of your book review. Regardless how many papers you publish in that, how many papers you communicate with the chief editor, it actually doesn't count. Yeah. And the basic step of the submissions, and probably people who submitted the paper already know the procedure, but I still list it here and go through very quickly. And the first, identify the journals. The second step is to submit the paper, and the third, review, receive the notifications. Sometimes when you submit the papers, you really don't look at their instruction. You're missing some piece. For instance, the format is not meet their requirement, and probably for instance, your submissions, you need to sometimes separate the chart, the tables from your full text. You cannot put everything together. You have to be separate. And sometimes people don't read that instruction carefully and submit everything in the full paper. And then you got the notice, say, hey, we are not accepting your paper. You have to revise it. And another thing that I mentioned, reminded me is the citation format. I went through the very painful experience when I submitted the paper for the outside of the field. Their format is horrible, But when you submitted the paper to the API or whatever, in our field, you say, okay, now we're not accepting it. Return to you, redo it, and resubmit. And then peer review process. I probably will spend our time talking on this topic, how the process is going, and that's the key part. And make sure your paper is accepted or not. It's that step. Wait, and wait sometimes it's a pain.
Do something else while you're waiting. Start another paper. Do something different.
And the revision and the revision, the different circles. If you're lucky enough, you're still in the revision loop. That means you still have the hope. And if you get the results, letter say, hey, you are out of the loop. You're done. And then you probably get the letter from the editor say, okay, you are accepted, rejected, or there is a back and forth major revision, minor revision supposed to.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay. And then
I think it's okay.
oh, you are very quick, smart. And then you usually, if you're lucky, say, okay, your paper accepted, and then you need to receive the proof. Sometimes you know the article, the chief, the editor, the staff, and the associate are sending you the camera ready things, and you have to go through again and check if you an error, and sign the copyright. You know, we have a lot of folks on the copyright expert, like Nick can knock it out of their head. Yeah.
But
So,
if you want to publish, close your eyes and sign the copyright. Hold your nose if you have to, but it's very difficult to get published in a journal without signing off the copyright.
you know, in terms of the sending the copyright, the transfer form is different journals have different formats. Some journals even ask you to submit the letters in conjunction with your first submission. Sometimes they just say, okay, when your paper is accepted, and then you sign the form. Anyway, it's minor things. Finally, if you're lucky and see your paper published in a journal.
And it's very satisfying. And I don't know why they send you all those proofs that you never have anything to do with and you have 20 years later. But it's still nice. You know, you can send one to your mother.
Can I just jump in quickly? And all of you, the students here, if you publish a paper, you can get $300 from SOIS. If you work as a co-author, you need split by how many authors there. So you don't need to wait until it's published. As long as you receive an email saying your paper is accepted, you can send an email to USAM directly.
And the Iris already have $100 in her pocket.
I get the mission, right?
Yeah. Okay, the first probably thinking about the first the slide talking about the basic step. I'm probably going to step by step, talking about in the detail. The first next step talking about otherwise about the journal selection. Right? I think this is quite important because it's probably like a shopping. You know, people if you're shopping something, you probably first step you have to select the right shoppers. You know, you want to buy the shoes, you don't want to go to the hardware store. That's totally, you know, it's not easy. However, submit the paper to write journal is tricky, especially for the new researcher. You know, it's sometimes the personal experience has told me that it's not look at the journal titles and say, hey, that match my research paper. No, that's not the truth. Sometimes the paper title looks very matched to your paper, but it's not true, especially in for the people use information systems science a lot. You know, sometimes the people journal of information science and the information system can be purely computer-oriented journals, do nothing with the library information science. But if you check the titles, you think that it's not now. So that's why we need talking about how to do that. First, you read the scope. You know, every journal. Now, if they are the formally published journal, they have the website. If you go to the website, look at the scope, the aim, object of the journals, that is not enough. And secondly, everybody can go that long. But I would suggest you also need to read who is served on the editorial board. If the people who serve on the editorial board is in your field, that suggests maybe it's a match. If the name is a totally match, if you editorial board guys is totally, you don't know the name, especially that probably is a wrong journal. That's the first one.
Best if you can cite some of them.
That's another thing. And also you have to understand his user group. You know, who's their users? Not only check about the editorial, who's their target users. You know, sometimes they're focused on the industry, sometimes they focus on academic. So that is a thing you need to understand. Also, you need to understand the taste, the style, and the emphasis. What do you mean the taste? You know, I'm talking about taste. If you're sitting in the field for a while, you know each journal, like people, have different style, have different tastes. Now, even the same researcher, when you just prepare your papers, and if you are aimed to the journals, you are always thinking your writing style fit their journals. So Jim, could you give me more examples about what they are talking about? For instance, the journal of the documentations. You know, they are accepted the IT-oriented papers. However, they are hesitant. They are hesitant to accept the paper with too many equations. Okay, if you that is you keep it in the mind. You know, even you are I'm talking about some topic. If I'm submitted to that journal, you know, I have to be very careful. On the other hand, if you submit it to the journal of the APM, IPM's information process and management. You know, that's actually they're encouraging you to including more, more equations, chart, and something like that. So you can see here, for instance, all address the information retriever, but different journals that have the tastes and style difference. You have to understand that the subtle difference. And also, another way is to best understand the journal to read their samples. You know, sometimes you go to the website, they provide the few sample, the sample papers, and usually it's free and PDF format, and you easily download your computer, and then you look at that. You know, I'm talking about a style. I'm also talking about the paper's length. You know, some journals they have very selective. You know, it's only have like a 10. Maximum like 8 pages, sometimes they don't care and something like that. And then understand their style. And also understand their ranking and status and in the disciplines, you know, like first tier, second tier, third tier. That's quite important, especially for the for new research. And you don't want to be submitting your first papers to the higher journal, higher ranking. But if you have that confidence, you definitely can do that. I mean,
or if your major professor tells you to.
Yeah, if you get some the experienced professors check your quality and feel confident, then submit it. That's a different story. And another thing is you have thinking about to take advantage about the interdisciplinary nature of journals, and especially in the recent there's a trend. A lot of the journals pop up. They are interdisciplinary. So sometimes you can take advantage of that. You know, some journals seems like it only address their field. Some journals they're encourage the people in the different disciplines to submit a paper to that. I think that's a really good. You have to look at that. What's their emphasis? Do you want to move a second? Yeah, I just want to. If you don't have some comments, I will move.
Is actually one that I put in, and it sort of follows up on what Jim was just saying, that you don't need to rush to go for that first tier journal, but you may want to do it for a given project. So for your dissertation research, you may want to work up to that, but you want to ask yourself and ask a senior colleague, you know, somebody who knows your area, knows the kind of journals you're doing. If you're a doctoral student, it's probably somebody on your committee, or more than one person. Are you ready for a top-tier journal? If you are, great, go for it. But otherwise, think about other things you can do. Early on, you can do a poster. And one of the advantages of posters is that when you have them up, you're talking one-on-one to people. And only the interested people are going to stop. And so you can have a really good experience. You can also have a crummy experience with posters where nobody stops because you've got a really original idea that nobody's thought of, and they think it's a crock. But you can think about, like, have a plan for how you want to disseminate. You know, do you want to try it in a poster first? Do you want to try it in a conference paper first? Because that's less formal than a journal article, and it can prepare you for that. So I think it's important to, you know, talk to somebody and make up a plan. Not that you wouldn't change it when that wonderful opportunity comes by, you know, the special issue in exactly what you are doing. Then you write for it no matter what, even if you figure it's going to be rejected. But because there may not be many people doing that, and you might have the one that they decide to add as that last one to round things out. So, oh, and I just want to say a word about professional journals too. LIS is a professional field, and so you want to think of professional journals. I think the times I've been involved in hiring faculty, I think it's been seen as a good thing if they have some of their publications in professional journals. You wouldn't want all of them there. And there are a few journals in our field that are both scholarly and professional. Library Quarterly comes to mind. I can't think of other examples offhand, but
Cataloging it.
I always think Cataloging Classification Quarterly is more a professional journal, but they publish a lot of research,
Yeah, they do.
and a lot of it's done by scholars. One thing to remember when you're looking at research done in professional journals is that a lot of academic librarians have to publish. And I think the quality has gotten better over the years. It used to be how I'd done it good in my library. But I think now they're more insightful and they're worthwhile. But again, that's going to be one of the ways that people judge whether it's top tier or second tier and so on. So, you know, you want to sort of work up, figure out where you are right now, and then work up to those top tier journals.
Then I can jump in.
Yep.
You know, Hugo and I have difference. You know, sometimes they insert their slide and ask her to go first, and her the talking inspires some idea. I'm jumping in, and I just like I two things. The first thing is in terms of the professional journal and the scholars the journal. I agree with Hope. You know, in the long run, I know when you prepare your package, and you always need some balance. The balance between the content papers and the journal papers, and the balance between the professional papers and the scholars papers. You know, you need to always thinking not put only the eye on the single category. Okay, you have to be, you know, prepare your dossier, you know, well. And the second thing that we're talking about, it's occurred to me, is that we're talking about professional journal and the scholar journals. And the scholar journal, actually, they're paying more attention to the research method. Okay, that's a significant difference. So that's why you need to take my class. Okay, you know, sometimes I would mention that to take advantage of the interdisciplinary, the nature of the journals. For instance, now this is the recent the study I'm working on. The study on the health, consumer, diabetes, information seeking behaviors. Now, if you check this topic, now you will see immediately. Now, this topic you can submit it to the traditional library information science journal. There's no doubt about that. But on the other hand, you can take advantage of the interdisciplinary nature of the papers and submit it to the health informatics journal. So if you open that door, actually the selection of the the journals, you know, you have to open the new territory. Okay, so that's just to give you an example of how you know, submitted your papers and not only focus on your disciplines and others. Renee, what's your question?
Can you submit them all at the same time?
Good question. Don't do that.
Okay.
You know.
Unless they're different papers.
Yeah.
They may turn out to be different papers because usually, I mean, you're dealing with a different audience. Like Jim said before, you have to know the user group.
Exactly. And another thing is we're talking, I was teaching the 591-2, which is a research method for math students. And one of this week, one of the discussion is talking about misconduct in the library information science. One of the things is submission, multiple paper submission to different journals. That's not good. Okay, excellent.
Unless they have different focus.
Yeah, that's different. I mean,
but you can't do an identical paper.
I'm talking about identical papers submitted.
Right. And then you couldn't do it because they're different journals, so you have to, your literature review has to be changed. And so
Exactly. Yeah. That's a different thing. Okay, now this is otherwise still keep going on the journal and the journal selections and oh, I'm sorry, who just added? I forgot to edit that. You know, when you're talking about the journals, actually you can classify journals by the different criteria. One is very important thing you have to thinking is SSCI and SCI. Another one is the human.
Arts and Humanities.
Yes.
Citation index.
Yes.
I think.
I think that if the journal is indexed by the one of them, that's an indication of high quality. I know. But I know in some of the universities, in the high-ranking universities, if your journal is not published in this kind of the database, it's not counted, regardless how many papers published. You have to be published in the high-ranking things, the journals. And second is we're talking about impact factors, and also talk low impact. You have to be very careful. The journal impact factor is relative. For instance, you cannot, in our field, our impact factor is low compared to the health, compared to computer, compared to the business. You cannot compare them directly, okay? It's a relative the figure, okay? For instance, Jesse's and what? Jeda or something like that. They're higher ranking, but their impact factors compared to the computer science, the second tier, you cannot compatible. You have to keep this in mind.
I hadn't thought of it, but that might be an interesting reason to publish in a different disciplines journal.
See, here's another reason. Submit your papers in the. But I will tell you the truth. I follow your thread. I submitted the paper to the computer science. You know what? They took 4 years to be published. Submit. The cycle is so long. You think about that. For computer science, every university have a computer science. Every faculty in the computer science want to get promoted. You think of the competition. But in our school level in science, relatively small disciplines. The author group is relatively small. So you take advantage of that, but also thinking about the negative part. Scholarly and professionally, we just addressing this issue too. And the peer review and not peer review. This is another category. And we're talking about the first one, and then and the peer review. And usually, peer review journal is much better than the non-peer review. Peer review, usually you have to go through the process, and any review can kill you in any of the point. But the peer review, not peer review, just look at your title, and usually the quality is relatively low. Okay. Conference papers and the journal papers, who already writing that, there's and the local journals and versus international journals. That's very important. Even there's English journals, but sometimes it's local. And for instance, there's Spanish, and there's Brazil, and there's level in Australia, China, Japan. There's a lot of the local journals, and some local journals even there's English. It's not so you have to pay attention. There's a difference of an international journal and a local journal, an electronic journal and a regular journal. This is another thing, and especially there's open source. Open access journals. And you open access journal, maybe I'm wrong, but at this point, the quality of the regular journal is much better than the open access. Every day, I know there's some objection. I mean, the situation is going to change. But currently, if I'm talking about the January the trend, I will tell the truth. Every day I can guard the one of the two. Call the paper from the open access journals. I'm not to say every single open access journal is low quality. As generally speaking, regular journal is high quality than the open access.
I think the other thing, go ahead.
But that situation may change. Okay, I will also the change. The change in which direction is hard to predict.
The other thing is that whether the open source journals are not as good or not, that is the perception that's out there. And when you're being hired and when you're getting tenure, it's the perception's as important as the fact.
Exactly. I will tell you the recently I just finished the tenure promotion. I reviewed one of the promotion from our universities. So the people, if they listed open access, I just ignore it. Period. I don't think that is a high quality. So no, I have maybe the situation is going to change. I know, especially for the spring year, the publisher, they have a lot of the high quality journals to pop up. The situation is going to change. But I'm not going to say, all the open access in general is not.
We have a good one in our field, information research.
Yeah, there's another examples.
There's first Monday, too.
Which is different.
Jen, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
I mean, I know I'm not a PhD student, so. But your list of conference paper versus journal paper, what about those conferences which lead to article publications? Like the conference on the Center on the...
Yeah, that's a good question. I was probably, that's reminded me another question. It's the same thing. Conference paper, not necessarily is always low in terms of their qualities. I can tell you the cigar. I mean, it's hard to get in. It's in our information super special thing. It's very hard, very competitive.
ACES annual too.
Yeah.
The full paper is reviewed, not just the proposal.
Exactly, but then answer your questions in terms of the conference paper and journal paper. I think the conference paper is a good opportunity to get your initial paddle studies to exposure to expert, to the other expert to get some feedback, which can be used for the future's publication. Especially for the new researchers, like put your food on the doorstep and to see test the water, see how the community responds to your research, and is there any suggestions, and something like that. And that's a very important step. I like the who is master of vocabulary. They always use the right word, streetlize your application. That's good things, step by step in different stage in different application.
It occurs to me that there's one more variation on that, and that's the conference paper that ends up published in the journal.
Yeah.
As a conference paper. I don't know how to regard that.
Yeah, I know. It's very interesting. All people always ask questions. How difference can make the conference paper to the journal paper? And the rule of thumb, at least you have to make like a 40% difference. Otherwise it looks like a two for me. This is my personal experience. I have different paper, but you guys can chip in. What's your guys? At least you have to make 40 difference in terms of their contents and something.
Yeah, I've given a conference paper and have then been invited to expand the paper for publication in a.
This is another example.
And sometimes it goes directly in as, say, the top 3 conference papers from, and I don't think they're as good as a refereed article, but I think they're better than a conference paper not covered. So they're kind of in between.
Exactly. And also there's Hope already mentioned that, take advantage of the special issues. Special issue usually is easy getting. Okay, period. After moving very fast, I mean, time running. This is only slide 1. Slide 1, 2, 3.
Okay,
We have a long way to go. Okay, now
This one has big writing, it won't take so long.
Yeah.
Oh, not provide dinner. So if you want to
Nick is going to be provided. Yeah, ice cream.
Hope you like Taco Bell.
Okay, so you probably asked questions. Jane, you mentioned the first tier, second tier, third tier, and could you give me a list? I'll be honestly speaking, it's hard to give you the list. The list is also controversial. For instance, for every school, especially I was an EC chair for several years. It's very hard to come up with the list, which is a first tier, second tier. Every people have a different opinion. This is the list based upon my personal understandings and also the previous their publications. There are people talking about the JSS, you people know that, and the information processing is the IPM, and the library quarterly, and the information library intensive research. And the second tier, don't argue with me, okay? Different people have different opinion. Journal of Information stands Journal JDoc and the Knowledge Organization. I'm sorry, I put it here in the
I
first
put
tier.
that in.
Thank you very much. You're great. I don't want to argue here.
I
Okay.
just argue one. JDoc should be the first tier.
Okay.
Yeah, I switched JDoc for LISR myself.
Yeah, JDoc has a much more theoretical
Right.
language.
So that's why I thought
So
there's a lot of the controversy things, And the college and the research library reference user surveys. I mean, there's a lot of new journal pop up and maybe change the landscape. You never know. And the third tier journals are online review, Canadian. I'm sorry, there's any Canadian people here. Canadian Journal Library Sense, Library Resources, including technical services, including research and cataloging and classification quality.
Which I also added.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
And I think it's interesting because I've watched over the years, I've published in both LERTS, this is called, and CCQ. And they've kind of gone back and forth on which one is the better journal to publish in. Right now I'd say it's probably CCQ. But I don't know if it's the editor, I haven't studied this, so I don't know if the difference comes from the editor or what, but.
Yeah, anyway, as Iris mentioned before, the information research is online journals, but it's a high quality and peer review, and also indexed by SSI.
Okay. This is my editor hat. When you send in the manuscript, make it look like the manuscript is you're told to make it look. You know, do everything exactly the way the instructions for authors. For two reasons. One is that if the editor has a lot of manuscripts to deal with, one that comes in the wrong format is the easiest way to shorten that pile. And the other thing is you want to just make it easy for the reviewers and easy for the editors. Because the reviewers in particular, I mean, you get no credit for that, basically. You know, we can list on our annual reports reviewed for some journals, but we can't really say much about it because it's confidential. And, you know, we can't be very specific. And so you want to at least make the reviewers feel good by the fact that you went to the trouble to make it readable. Okay? Length is very important. Journals don't always say what the length should be. If they don't, I would suggest you pick some average articles in terms of page numbers and make a relatively accurate guess on how many words per page. Because if you're way out, either too short, it's going to look like it's not worth reading. Too long, nobody's going to want to wade through it. So you need to get that. And then you need to take one read through your manuscript, only looking for that. Nothing about content, okay? So on all the other reads through your manuscript, you're going to be looking at content and the clarity of your prose and things like that. But take one, or better yet, get somebody else to do it for you. And just go through and figure out, have you complied? It doesn't take that long, and it's really important, I think.
Okay. Can I just add
Sure.
a couple points? I think in terms of length, according to my personal experience, usually research paper is going to be, you know, some people use font size, you know, 10, some 12, some double space, 1.5 space. But the rule of thumb is for the research paper is like 5,000 words to 7,000 words. That probably is good, you know. It's a rule of thumb. It's not always right. Make sure if the number of the words within the 5,000 to 7,000 is probably is okay. Most of the journal is okay with that.
Probably if you're doing something that's more humanities based, it would end up being longer.
A little bit longer. I'm just talking about the average.
Yeah.
No,
What?
about 6,000
Yeah.
words for humanities.
Okay. I guess I mean, I'm the person that Richard Smiley has said wrote the longest paper he's ever edited, so. But he published it. Okay. Second thing you need to do, this is the hard part. The easy part's the compliance, right? The hard part is you need to send a high quality manuscript. And so you need to look at what resources are at your disposal. One of the things that you can do is ask one of your senior colleagues, whether it's a faculty member, another doctoral student, somebody who's already done this stuff. Do you think I'm ready? Do you think this is going to be a high quality manuscript? Another thing you can do is co-author with somebody who's more experienced and has had successes. Because chances are they have, even if not consciously, they know what you need to do, even if it's intuitive. The other thing is you need to revise. and revise, and then when you think you're ready, revise only one more time. Because you know how on an exam, your first guess is usually right, and you go back through and you erase it and put something different and you get it wrong? Well, that last revision is sort of like that. So there's a very thin line between revising and tinkering. And tinkering usually makes a mess of your manuscript. So that's, I think, something that you can think about. I mean, literary authors revise all the time, and our writing isn't that much easier. It's just very different. And so when you revise, you can revise with different things in mind each round. You know, the tone, the clarity, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think the book I use it. I always tell Hope that the most thing I learned from him is the words they use. Say what's the difference between the tinker and the revise. She knows that sound difference very well. And she used another word, is intuitive. I will tell you, from the paper reviewer perspective. And then when the paper is coming to me, I look at the papers. I just browsing it. I can get to the, I will say 80% get it yes no. I'm not even reading. I just look at the format. I just look at their the things, the length, format, and things that not natures. I will 80% sure this paper is gonna be QA and just forward to the editor. So that's why I like the words the whole mention intuitive, and then you just go get through it. So that's why impression is very important. If the people with the impression want to kill you, you can see the consequence.
Well, and I think the other thing about that is that when you get a really well presented paper, you know that somebody's taken time to craft it. When you get one that looks sloppy, you think, well, did they finish their thinking? They didn't finish their writing.
Yeah.
And so, it just creates a whole image. Actually, the other thing that I look at when I first review a paper, in addition to what Jim was saying, is the bibliography. If they haven't quoted somebody who's in the territory, then I start wondering what the heck they're doing. Or are they just out of scope? And maybe they applied to the wrong journal.
Out of the touch.
Yeah, out of touch. Okay.
But then, okay, here's another thing in terms of format of the papers. And I know all the people sitting in this class in the level of information science, the professionals, and but not everybody notice. When you're writing your abstracts, some journals they are very nice. They provide structurally the template. When you submit it to your journals, you have to make sure every perspective have to be covered. But in some journals, they say, hey, submit your journal, submit your abstracts. So be careful when you submit it. I just listed there's a basic element you're supposed to be included in your abstract, because when the chief editor is sending the paper to the reviewers, they usually only give the abstracts. If the abstract is ugly and poorly written, people probably chance to be reviewed is, in the first round they always threw to the garbage can. And what is the basic element supposed to include in the abstract? And the first is the purpose of your papers. And some people I read the abstract through. I already finished all the sentences. I don't know what they are talking about. So you have to be very clear in the first sentence what is the purpose, and make sure eye-catching sentence, and make sure you know what you are doing. And the methodology part. Methodology is the key part. I will tell you, the methodology, what kind of methodology they use, because it's very important too. Usually I'm review, if the editor gives me the list of the review paper, asks me to pick up one, I check that part. And if that part is not fill in my research method, I usually skip it. Okay. And the funding. So what is the major funding? Sometimes people do the research without the funding. So what the heck are you doing? There's no funding, there's no significance. And also need to talking about the limitation and implications. When you research talk about there's no perfect. What is the potential limitation and the implications and the social implication, technical implications you are talking about that, practical implications, and then what is your creative idea? That's the major part too. What's the originalities and the value of the papers. Do you want to add something or just?
No, I can just move on to the next one. A lot of this, though, boils down to the so what question, which you always have to ask yourself and can be devastating. Sometimes you have to make it up, but I've never done it. But if you want to go back and look at abstracts more, there is an ISO standard, which is actually not too difficult to wade through, and it's very short. I think it's 7 pages, including who's on the committee. So you can get those online. But one of the things that I have a theory about why we have such bad abstracts, because it's not just other people who have bad abstracts. Our field has bad abstracts.
I want to listen. What's the reason? Because
I think it's because we do it last, and we're tired of it by then. We just want to get it off to the editor and submit it and get it out of our faces, and so we throw together that abstract. And like Jin says, often when you're asked to review a paper, all you see is the abstract first, until you say you're willing to review it. And then you get the whole paper. So the abstract's really important. Next thing that happens is that abstract goes, if you're accepted and published, it goes into a database, and that's where you're going to do free text searching.
Yeah, that's good.
And you want people to read your stuff because you want them to cite it so that you'll end up in the citation indexes, right? So that's not going to happen if you don't put in the usual kinds of terminology that would be used for the concepts you're talking about. And, all the usual things about abstracting you've probably been told already, like don't use negatives. This article is not about elephants. It's not useful because it'll be retrieved when people are looking at elephants. So you think about the way you structure it, and you think about the terminology you put in, as well as following all those things. So you need to think, like set yourself up psychologically to spend serious time on that abstract when you're done with everything else. When you're done with everything else, there's still a major stage left to do. So
Good point.
that's my sermon for the day.
Ben? I'm going to
Done,
move.
yeah.
Okay, this so in terms of about the table contents things, my personal experience is there's several of the suggestions, and use the figures and if possible, and use tables because that is a very eye-catching, very summarized and put things together, and there's the one picture worth 1,000 words, and it's make you more attractive. And another thing is that you have to make sure the introduction part is important, but don't put too much effort on the introduction. And I read some articles. Their introduction part occupies one half of the papers. So if that's the case, you can see the guy had just don't get it. What is the format? The message is not even more than 1/3. Even one fourth. Not to spend too much time on the introduction. And then conclusion part is also very important. And you have the brief recap, your findings, draw the implications, and address the research limits and the future direction. And this is a basic component, usually supposed to be included in the conclusion. And especially the reviewer, and they spend more time. They read this kind of sections and make sure that part is well addressed and a very important component included.
I think that's especially important for doctoral students to remember, because I've noticed it more as much at conferences as in journal articles. A doctoral student is spending so much of their time refining the research question, doing the literature review, figuring out your methodology, that there seems to be an enhanced risk that you're going to spend too much time on that. I don't know how many times I've been in a conference session where a doctoral student will have 5 minutes left after explaining all that. So I spent 15 minutes on the research question, the lit review, and the methodology, and they haven't got any time to tell you anything else. And so I think that can happen in a journal article as well. So you want to remember that although you're focused on that because you're doing a research degree, so the nuts and bolts are almost more important than the findings for you. That you need to think about this is this is real faculty stuff. This is what you are going to be judged on for your tenure. So you need to have a really good article that does play out, as Jen was saying before, the findings and the conclusions especially. Because otherwise, we are going to say, so what?
Then,
Yeah.
I move.
Actually, I had one other thing which sounds
Go ahead.
trivial now, but if you're doing something that's more humanities-based, you may not have figures, but you'll often have a mental model, and making a diagram of it, I think, is very helpful.
That's a good point, because my research is always quantitative research, so I use table.
See, that's why we get along, we just talk a different language.
Yeah, and also...
That's why you keep together.
Yeah.
That's, oh, about the citations. And citation, I mean, so we just back to the first impression and of the reviewer. The one who mentioned that also citation part. And sometimes if you look at the people, their citations, they only list like less than 10 citations. Do you think that guys are serious about their research? If not, okay. And also, if they're list like 20 citations, and more than half of them is internet, the link. Do you think that is a serious research? I'm even now looking at content. I'm just to make a judge, poor guy, kill them.
This is the reviewer talking.
Exactly, and you have to, genuinely speaking, if you do the serious research, you probably need including like a 30 to 50 journals, and then most of them are supposed to be journal citation. And I know at this point, internet has become citation components increase. Sometimes, especially when you're citing some factors, so you have to use that. That's okay, but don't make the majority of your citation is internet, the link, something like that. Oh, questions?
Yeah. Is 30 to 50, you said journals, but books, I'm assuming would also be acceptable in that sort of range?
In terms of the book?
Yeah, if you're citing from...
Oh, yeah. Book, definitely,
Okay.
yeah, definitely including. Book journals, yeah, definitely.
And the other exception I would think of, if you're, for example, looking at the media response to something, you would have a lot of things, say, from the web or from newspapers, but you would also have the other critical stuff, I would think.
What about when you're citing things like reports and so forth that you do find online, like white papers and
That's
so
a good
forth?
point, right.
Yeah.
And then, like a Pew report, there's a lot of things. They have the very updated data is there. And yes, that's why there are people torrent still cited something from the Pew report, and then there's other things,
Or lots of government reports like that.
Yeah.
But your abstract will probably point to that and
Yeah.
say, using primary source materials,
Yeah.
this research.
Yeah, because
So you're gonna establish
that's
that.
a very good point.
Excellent point. Excellent.
Yes, the last one.
And last one is very important. It's my personal experience. And if you can set your own paper. I mean, there's not the essay issue. Okay, I'm talking about a cited your works related to your. I'm not suggesting you studied everything which is not relevant and then putting in a citation. That can cause a problem. The reason, if I'm usually, sometimes there's a blind reviewer. I don't know who is the author, but sometimes I can tell. Now when you read the articles, I know who is the author. And you can tell, you know what I'm talking about. And then if there's no people, sometimes it's not like Jesse's, you know who is the author. And if you guys publish the very serious papers and there's no previous the research supported, the impression, no, whether you believe or not, that's the psychological part of the reviewers. So that's why I want you get encouraged to say that you are relevant word. Be careful, use the relevant.
I imagine you have received manuscripts back that say, you should read Jin Zhang for this topic. Because that happens.
Yeah. Oh, reference summations, and you have the who already mentioned reference. I think you have to check that very carefully. I think that each journal have different format in terms of their citations, reference format. Sometimes I hate the smaller numbers, the sequential numbers. That's it's awful. Especially when you want to make some change, add some new things. Oh, painful.
Okay. Software, right? You use EndNote or other reference works. Then you can switch from one style to another style automatically. So that's potentially what we might have a workshop later, about using those software to talk about.
Good point. I didn't use it, and it making me like a painful experience.
Yeah, because every time you convert it, it's very difficult.
And there is a good website, and I think it's at Penn State, for looking at the different kinds of citations and telling you how to cite web.
Purdue.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
Okay. Another thing, there is the different format in terms of submission, electronic submission and paper submission. I think at this point, the paper submission already gone. Most people use email attachment, or they have very nice interface. You can submit your papers. And sometimes, when you submitted the papers, usually the chief editor asks you to recommend it, who is going to be your reviewer. And there's two cases. First case, they want you recommend who is more relevant to your research work, and they can review your paper. And the second category is you recommend who not to review your work. Because if I'm criticize your work, you don't want to be the guy to look at that and kill you immediately. There's the two cases.
And also when you do that, there is also conflict of interest. You cannot ask your co-author or your professor.
Yeah. For instance, your advisors, the senior advisor, you are co-authors before. That probably is not. Reviewers, and the review actually it really depends on the journals, and there are different kind of review, and the peer review, and second editorial board review, and editor review, and blend review, and bias. There's different kind of reviewers. I think the first one is most the common one. And sometimes they go to the editorial board, and sometimes the editor can make a decision.
Yeah.
And we need to move. And the review criteria. And if you review the papers, and usually the listed, from the scope of journal, academia, the merit, and the ordinarily, the presentation language, figure, table, and so on. And the first thing first, you can look at that. I usually, I will tell you the truth. If the schedule is tight, I intentionally pick some journals which is out of scope. I just say, okay, out of scope and submit it. And that happens. Not everybody they read the instruction carefully, and they submitted the papers and actually do nothing with your journal's scope.
So you, as a reviewer, have a criteria you have to meet, and then you say, oh, I'm swamped this month, so I'll just quickly look through a list of ones out of scope and get them in. And no, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, there's always time pressure. But that's what you can do that?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Yes. I say this is out of scope.
And then you were done with one paper for...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and it's fairly common. I know I was talking to Richard because I used to edit Knowledge Organization, now he's editing. And I said, are you still getting lots of papers on knowledge management? yes, he said, and they're out of scope, it said so quite clearly.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, it's not a negative, I didn't even know that, it's a clever way of doing some work.
Mhm.
And you have another thing is the presentation, and then who mentioned that the language, the format and the figures, and some people provided the figures without the titles, and that kind of things. If you look at that paper, this guy's not professional, it's not experienced, and very bad impression. Make sure if their paper, if there's the figures, they have the titles, captions, and the tables, and also have the the caption for each of the paper, and make sure the number is a sequential numbers. Sometimes you can check the skip, some of the it's not.
Oh, they have things that are cited in parentheses and not in the bibliography.
Yeah, yeah,
Those leap off the page when you're reviewing.
yeah.
You can't see them in your own work, but somebody else's, they just jump out and go, "Ugh."
Okay, when you everything is go through the entire process, and then you get letters from chief editors, and they have the comments go with that, and basically there's a 5 categories. The one is accepted as it is, accepted with minor revisions, accepted with major revisions, reject, and recommended to the other journal that's out of scope the situations. And according to my personal experience, when I review a paper, I never ever say accepted as it is. I tell you
remember
why.
last time I did
Because if you do that, the chief editor is thinking that you probably you didn't read it. And, and another thing is that as a reviewer, is you always don't want to say you're too lazy, too lazy. And on the other hand, any of the paper, you can find something. My point is that it's not serious enough to damage. Okay, so in most cases, I never use accept it as it is, and then there's a major revision, minor revision, and a reject. And that's the most.
We also do very few minor, mostly major revisions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hope.
Yeah, and I think often what it is, in my experience, is that it'll be something like a piece of the literature or something that just was missed. And usually, or often anyway, you can just go back and fill in that bit. But I think we can look at the next page that goes along with
And about the feedback, this is a very, very crucial part. And I will tell you the feeling, sometimes when the feedback come out, your feeling is very complicated. Sometimes you want to read it, sometimes you hesitate, you don't want to read it. So it's dependent on that, sometimes the people, as authors, I have this kind of feeling. I treat my papers as my kids. Thinking about the people who say your kids are stupid, what's your feeling? It's really hurt you. The feeling is exactly the same when we read some negative comments on the paper. And that's the how to respond. Reviewers' comments is kind of art. If you not agree with the reviewer, you have to use diplomatic way to say. I will tell you my personal experience. And the first time I submitted one papers to the journals, and it's a major revision. I'm very happy, and they give some comment. I have to address these comments, and then next round the reviewer come back. They are very, very, very angry because they say this one I just fight back, and they say. The guy uses the words, you hold the gun, shoot your foot. There's something worse like that. Oh my gosh! And the first time they say, okay, after revision, you can accept it. And after I fight back directly, and they say, reject it. And you know what? I didn't reject it, fine. I submitted a different journal. You know what happened?
They send it to some reviewer.
Exactly! This guy read it, killed it immediately.
And they'll usually say, I reviewed this crummy paper for so-and-so, and I still don't like it.
Exactly!
Because if they suddenly like it, then
Oh,
they've got
my.
intellectual mud on their face, right?
Oh my gosh! I learned the lesson in a very hard way, but the good news is that I submitted the papers to the Computer Science Journal. It eventually accepted it. But that's the thing that I will tell you. You know, it should be. That's why I use the words how the response the reviewers' comments. You need the experience. You need to. It's not just address it directly. And you know, the people are reading when the reviewers reading your feedback, they also with some feeling. Then if you say, blah, 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 you're wrong, I would hurt too. I will hurt too. So I will, because you are the underdog. You are an underdog. You cannot, the fight is not on the leveling ground.
It's not
Yeah,
about
I just add my
logic.
experience. One time when I sent the review, I always do a very detailed job, you know, thank them for their constructive feedback. So the review said, you know, when they final decision say accept, and they keep the person put comments there too. This is the first time I thought my comments make a difference. So the reviewer does appreciate, so they put it back too. So I think it's also just like you said, the feeling. It is. They treat their feedback and comments very seriously too. So hopefully those comments are considered in the revision.
Exactly.
Well, and the other thing is the argument catches the editor in the middle, which is a real, I don't think I ever lost sleep over it, but I sure got irritated. People going back and forth and back and forth.
I've lost sleep over it.
I didn't lose sleep over it as an editor, but I really got cranky.
And I heard another story. I have a chance to the big shot in the field. I have several years ago. I was a PhD student, and he told me his personal experience. And when these guys received the feedback from the reviewers, and he told me that after they read it, they take their dog, they take their wife, and not talk to the wife for 3 days. And you can tell the feeling, you know, it's really hurt. But anyway, keep going. And you have to be positive. Usually, but even the words, the tone probably is not acceptable. Most of the case, the comments from reviewers is very useful. That's my personal experience. Even you're not, agree with their tones, but you have to read there carefully. I'm not saying every word they say is right, but I'm saying most of the case, they're right. And I have some case they misunderstood my things. Just nicely explain that. But in most of the case, you get some very useful feedback from the reviewers. You know, after all, they are expert in the field. Otherwise, the chief editor wouldn't pick up. And they usually respond in 1 to 3 months, usually, and don't get anything like after 1 year, and everything.
You'll be out of the database by then.
And usually I put the last one is the reviewer is always right. Don't just irritate him. You know the consequence. You don't want to see that consequence. You are ended up. Okay.
And then I added the small print.
Good, I'm glad. I've had wrong reviewers.
Yeah, but basically,
I know.
yeah.
Keep
Even if
going.
they're tactless.
Because time is running out, and sometimes you need to address their concerns, and use a separate page and address each of the point. And sometimes the previous one in the paper format usually they provide 2 versions. One version is you make a revision. Another one is a clean revision. And I totally agree with the hope. You have to provide all the convenience to the reviewers. And if you make the reviewer not comfortable, then they make you comfortable. That is the thing.
When you won't get the reviewers time and attention because they've got other things to do. They've got tenured reviews to write, they've got their own articles to write, they've got courses to teach, they've got research to do. So reviewing is just one little chunk in there.
Okay, this is a go very quick. In terms of the second, you have sometimes you have the eye-catching the titles, that is very important. And also well-structured abstract, academic merits, we have included that part, and also sound and solid research methods. That's very important. I review people, I put much more time on the research methods. I'm not looking for the result, and the result may be glorious. But if the research method is very shady, and you can quickly put in a penalty list, and also clearly state the practical and the theoretical implications, and also you have to make sure every important claim you must include in citation. Especially when the research paper, blah 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 blah, and then people may ask questions, where to get this? That is very careful. Okay. Previous job and show the consistency on research. I mentioned that if you related, make sure it's consistent. And if you have if your research is supported by the grant, mention that, because that is actually added the credit. If I look at that and acknowledgement, if you respond by the the more positive stating, we like the words intuitive. You get the credit, for that. Okay. How many papers are left? Oh, go quick. And if paper is rejected, it's not the dead end of your life. You need to keep working on and check the reason. What's the rejection? What's the rejections? And sometimes out of scope, thinking of different journals. And if sometimes you have to thinking, and if something is very constructive, the feedback, you have to thinking seriously to revise it based upon their suggestions. And submit it. Another thing is submit it to the low-rank journals. Low-ranking, low tiers. If the first tier is rejected, thinking about the second tier. Second tier rejected, go to I'm stuck. I wish to some point you're lucky enough. And always positive and never give up. So that, and the pain of the rejection is a part of your life as your professor and as a researcher.
Okay. First of all, I didn't realize until I was an editor how much power the editor actually has. So you want to make it as easy as possible for the editor to help you. And one thing that the editor does that's very important is choose the reviewers. Okay, so I can send it to, okay, I can send it to Birger Gerland. And he's going to look at everything, and he's going to know all your sources, and he's going to have written it all before. And if I see somebody who's a little bit arrogant, I might just have sent their paper to Birger. On the other hand, I might send it to somebody nice like Jim, And so, well, I'm going to say that for now. And
usually I'm a generous. I'm not used to harsh words to the.
Well, you would never write a nasty review. You'd always at least word it nicely. So, if I see one that I'm quite sure is a doctoral student, I want to be more encouraging maybe, and then I send it to somebody different. So the other thing is, though, that I really liked good manuscripts when I was an editor because they're easy. I can send them to anybody. I don't have to do much with them. They're going to come back with good reviews. I can say, fix these 4 things and you're in. All right. If it's bad, you get into, say, arguments between the author and the reviewers, or if it's weak, then it becomes a lot of work for the editor. And you don't want that to happen. I remember the worst thing I had to do as editor was write letters of rejection. Because you want to give reasons for it, and it just took a lot of time. So you want to minimize the editor's stress. Make the editor happy.
Yeah, I think that the feeling is the same as, probably the same as as a professor, a teacher, as an instructor.
Yeah, it's very similar.
You know, the students sitting in your class, and then you always the pressure to look at the paper, student papers, well done. You know, it's kind of, you can, you know, if you look at the Sharpie papers, you have to find the way, where's the problem? You have to make some
And you
comments.
have to make lots of comments.
Yeah, it's you know,
It's much easier to be encouraging
exactly.
and more fun.
Hmm?
You can go to the next slide.
I forgot that.
This is just a couple of things that came up, and questions that you can think about. We won't discuss them right now. But one of the things I think is that my personal feeling is that in a professional field we have an obligation to disseminate our research to the field, and also to make it, to write it in an accessible manner. So for example, when I've written stuff for the high-flown theory feminist journal Signs, I write like they write. You can't read it, right? Some of you have. If I write for Cataloging and Classification Quarterly, I'm not going to write like that. I'm going to write quite differently. But it can be the writing, all kinds of different things, going to conferences. I love to go to WLA because you get real people, not French academics. So that's one question. These are sort of ethical questions, I guess. And the other one is a journal article that came into my hands very nicely, looking at gender differences. And I don't know how widespread this is, but I think it's just one of those things you have to recall. Keep in mind that there's, I don't know why this is, I suspect this is a matter of time that men have gotten more published than women. But, because we're taking care of men.
Excellent point.
Yay! Except for people who cook. But
We need a move.
no.
Keep going.
Wait until the next potluck and come and have Jim's cooking. But it's, I mean, those are just facts, and so you need to know about them. Now we can vote. Okay. Again, from the editor's view about reviewing, often the editorial board is asked to review as peer reviews, so they're blind reviews. Some journals, the editor or the editorial assistant, more likely, will go online and on the web or in OPAC or an index or something and look for people. Sometimes they'll be taken out of the bibliography. My favorite didn't even come from our field. My son, who's in computer science, was once sent his own paper to review. It was for a conference, which is much more important, actually, in computer science than a journal article. So you need to think about that. We can go on to the next one. When you get those comments back, you probably will not like all of them. Sometimes you won't like any of them, but I suggest that you glance over them, get upset, wait 72 hours at least. I used to say 48. 48 isn't enough. I'd say at least 72 hours. And then go back and read them, and you can filter out the bits, if there are some, and there usually are, but not always. And you can find the things that are useful. You take those as a gift. It's a poorly wrapped gift sometimes, but and sometimes there's nothing in there but tissue paper. But you take those, and even if you're going to send it to a different journal, they're probably useful. Even if they tell you something you want to exclude, you may end up putting in a line that says, this treatment excludes X. Okay, or this literature review is not concerned with whatever. And basically explain, you know, that it's not relevant. But you would send it to another journal maybe at that point. I put in here that you can do sort of a triage on the comments from reviewers. I mean, there may be some things that say write a different journal or write a different article. You can't just do that, right? So you're not going to send it back to the same journal if it's that radical. But you can still use that information to help refocus and maybe go to a different journal. But sometimes you can go through and almost everything will be easy. and there may only be one or two laborious things. So you go through, do all the easy stuff first, because that one's going to live, right? And then you can, sometimes you've actually taken care of the critical things by that time. I'll go on to the next one.
Yeah, I try to jump in because the people are reading out there. I'm just shut up. Let finish.
But I think this is the key. Don't stop. Keep going. Sometimes you get that devastating one. The worst one I ever got was, this sounds like a term paper. Of course it was. That one I let go. But you know, no matter what you get back, and go talk it over with somebody.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, somebody else is going to be able to see it a lot more easily than you can.
The people use the word. It looks like a term paper. You know, I know that a lot of people use that kind of word.
I'm glad to say that was a long time ago.
Maybe we can have a one or two question quickly.
I didn't, well, I had something accepted and then didn't hear from them for months, of course, took forever. And then out of the nowhere, out of the blue, they say you have 48 hours to resubmit your revisions, and you're never going to see this again, and you better, like, you know, be happy with what you. And so, is that normal? I guess to just be hit in the middle of the week? Well, you didn't even check your email one day, which I do.
Yeah, that basically is your paper already go to the print stage.
That's good news when you see
Yeah, that basically is a camera-ready thing. You know,
Right, but
you don't need to.
is it normal to just have a
Yes,
come
40
out of
hours
the
is
blue,
very
you have
normal.
to drop everything that you were doing to get out of here?
No,
Yeah.
That's
Really?
true.
it doesn't always happen.
And then
It
they
varies
took
a
3
lot
months
with
to
the journal.
and then they didn't even look at it for 3 months. So they give you 48 hours and then
That's printing editors.
That's
You
a
know,
proofreading, not a revision. It's just
exactly.
proofreading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
proofreading, right?
Yeah.
But then they didn't do anything with it for even months more. So like they give you
No,
48
no,
hours
no.
and then they don't even.
Yeah.
Just like you go to see a doctor, you have to wait for an hour. They only see you 5 minutes anyway. So that's what they do.
And I guess if you have no idea it's coming, and then you have to drop everything that was on your schedule to fix your errors.
Yep, that's the way it is.
Okay. Well, it's good to know.
How do people get involved with being reviewers?
You can volunteer. And I mean, when journal editors choose reviewers, well, I remember when I first started reviewing knowledge organization, or editing knowledge organization, I had an assistant, and she'd come in with a paper, and I'd look at the abstract and tell her these 3 people. And she came in one day, and I couldn't think of anybody, and she said, "You ran out of friends, didn't you?" And she was right. So you know, so
networking.
yeah, networking.
And also publish too. The more
Yeah.
you publish, the more you'll need.
Exactly. Usually they
Yeah.
approach you instead of you approach them.
Great. Thank you so much for very insightful.